star-spangled lie as you have just told me. If I were you, I would try some other line of business.
If it wasn't for that hair, I'd swear that...
A black and white postcard of a city, a runaway princess on the back of a Vespa, an American reporter who falls in love and walks away anyway. You know this movie. You felt it. Maybe you watched it with your mother or alone at midnight and decided that this is what love was supposed to look like. Beautiful, brief, impossible. Roman Holiday is a film about sacrifice. A princess sacrifices her freedom for duty. A reporter sacrifices the story of his life for love. A photographer sacrifices the payday of a lifetime for a friend. But here's the part nobody tells you. Every single person in that movie made a real sacrifice in their actual life that was bigger, darker, and more devastating than anything in the script. One of them survived a Nazi occupation as a child, ate tulip bulbs to stay alive, and walked straight into famine zones in Africa while cancer was quietly killing her. One of them was a leading man so principled he risked his entire career to defy the blacklist, and lost a son in a way no father should ever have to bury one. One of them, 10 years before he ever cracked a joke beside Audrey Hepburn, pulled 47 wounded Marines out of a bloody Pacific reef under machine gun fire. And then there are the others. The Italian count who was thrown in prison during the war. The American character actor who ended his days in a Brighton nursing home. The hairdresser who flirted with Audrey on screen and was dead at 57. 3 faces above the title. A whole gallery of forgotten ones beside them. Lives nobody warned you about. Let's see what really happened.
To change your uniform to meet the international...
Audrey Hepburn as Princess Anne Audrey Kathleen Rustin was born on May 4th, 1929 in Ixelles, a quiet corner of Brussels, Belgium. Her mother was a Dutch baroness. Her father walked out when she was 6 and broke something inside her that never fully healed. She was 24 years old when she became Princess Anne. She wasn't supposed to get the part. William Wyler wanted Elizabeth Taylor. He wanted Jean Simmons. He didn't want an unknown European girl with no curves and no pedigree. But friends, listen to this, because Hollywood almost never tells you stories like this. Gregory Peck saw her screen test and personally insisted that her name appear above the title, beside his, with the words introducing Audrey Hepburn, a leading man who gave away his own billing. That's how Audrey Hepburn became a star. But the Vespa eventually stopped, and that's where the real story begins. And here is what most people don't know about the woman who looked so weightless on that scooter. She had spent her childhood starving. During the Dutch hunger winter of 1944, the Nazis cut off food and fuel to occupied Holland in retaliation for railway strikes. Audrey ground tulip bulbs into flour to bake biscuits. People dropped dead in the streets around her. Her uncle was executed by the Germans. Her cousin was executed. One of her brothers was shipped to a Nazi labor camp. The woman who would later define elegance for the entire world learned what hunger felt like before she ever learned what fame felt like. And here is the sacrifice you have to understand. Princess Anne gave up the man she loved for her people. Now Audrey Hepburn gave up the career she loved for the world's children. In 1988, she walked away from Hollywood almost entirely and became a goodwill ambassador for UNICEF. Ethiopia, Somalia, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Sudan. The little girl who had once eaten tulip bulbs walked into famine camps and held dying children in her arms. Not for a photo opportunity, not for a press release, but for hours, every day, for years. In September of 1992, she came home from Somalia with stomach pain. It was appendiceal cancer. She died on January 20th, 1993. The official cause was cancer of the appendix. But the real cause was a body that had been quietly worn down by 63 years of giving. First to a war that took her family, then to a world that took her childhood, and then to children who would never know her name. She was 63. Her 2 sons were at her bedside. Her partner, Robert Wolders, was holding her. She was buried in a plain oak coffin in a small village cemetery in Tolochenaz, Switzerland, marked by a simple wooden cross. No grand mausoleum, no marble. The most photographed face of the 20th century chose pine. At the time of her death, Audrey Hepburn's estimated net worth was approximately $55 million. about 100 million in today's money. But here is the only number that ever mattered to her. Every single dollar of that fortune was being used, in her final years, to feed children she would never meet. The woman who had ground tulip bulbs into flower died richer than most people on earth and gave it all back to the kind of child she once was. Princess Anne said goodbye to love and walked back into duty. Audrey Hepburn said goodbye to fame and walked into famine. The woman wasn't acting on that Vespa. She was rehearsing the rest of her life.
Don't worry, Doctor. I'll be calm and relaxed. I'll bow and I'll smile.
Gregory Peck as Joe Bradley Eldred Gregory Peck was born on April 5, 1916 in La Jolla, California. His parents divorced when he was 3 and his grandmother raised him. He was 37 years old when he became Joe Bradley, the cynical reporter who falls in love with a princess and then chooses, quietly and devastatingly, not to ruin her life by telling the world. You probably know him as Atticus Finch. The American Film Institute named that role the greatest film hero of the past 100 years. And they announced it just weeks before he died, almost as if the universe were giving him one final standing ovation. But the typewriter eventually went silent. And that's where the real story begins. He was supposed to fight in World War II. He couldn't because choreographer Martha Graham had braced her knee against his back during a stretching class years earlier and pushed so hard she ruptured a disc in his spine. The snap was audible across the room. He lived in chronic pain for the rest of his life. He used the career that injury accidentally gave him with extraordinary courage. In 1947, while half of Hollywood was crawling before the House Un-American Activities Committee, Peck signed his name to a public letter denouncing the blacklist. He was the leading man who risked the leading roles. He was the box office king who told the witch hunters no. He was the patriot the Patriots tried to silence. Richard Nixon never forgave him. Once Lyndon Johnson awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1969, Joe Bradley sacrificed his career-making scoop for the woman he loved. Gregory Peck sacrificed years of safety and comfort for his conscience. But here is where this story becomes something no movie poster ever prepared you for. The role he could never escape was the one called father. In 1975, while Peck was living in France, his oldest son Jonathan, a young news reporter dealing with vascular disease, the end of a relationship, and the suicide of a former girlfriend, took his own life in a quiet apartment. Peck got the call from across an ocean. He never spoke about it publicly without his eyes filling. He carried it for the rest of his life. Atticus Finch never had to make that phone call. Gregory Peck did. He died on June 12th, 2003. The official cause was bronchopneumonia. The real cause was 87 years of carrying everything. The chronic spine pain, the lost son, the quiet wars he had fought in Hollywood without ever raising his voice. He died in his sleep, in his own bed, in his French chateau-style estate in the Holmby Hills neighborhood of Los Angeles. His wife Veronique was holding his hand when he went. There was no struggle. The man who had played America's moral conscience for half a century simply finished his shift and went home. At the time of his death, Gregory Peck's estimated net worth was approximately $40 million, about $70 million in today's money. A year after he died, his widow sold the family estate alone for $22 million to a Google billionaire named Eric Schmidt, once because the gardens Peck had personally tended were too vast for one widow to keep. He left the world a fortune. He left his children a moral inheritance worth more. Joe Bradley walked away from the woman he loved because telling her story would have destroyed her. Gregory Peck spent his entire life walking toward the people the world had decided to destroy and standing in front of them. He didn't play Atticus Finch. He just finally got the script that matched the man he already was. Eddie Albert as Irving Radovich. Edward Albert Heimberger was born on April 22, 1906, in Rock Island, Illinois. He was 47 years old when he became Irving Radovich, the wisecracking photographer hiding his camera in a cigarette lighter. Roman Holiday earned him an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor. You probably remember him from Green Acres, that goofy CBS sitcom that ran from 1965 to 1971. Oliver Wendell Douglas, the New York lawyer who moves to a farm, the man in the suit standing next to a pig named Arnold Ziffel. Now, I need you to stop and really hear this one, because the gap between the man you saw on Green Acres and the man who actually existed is one of the widest in all of Hollywood. And here is the detail that changes everything you think you know about the man with the pig. Imagine the silence on the set of Green Acres. The pig walking past a fence, a studio audience giggling at a cornfield gag. Now contrast that with the deafening roar of November 21st, 1943, the Battle of Tarawa, one of the bloodiest engagements of the Pacific War. Lieutenant Edward Heimberger of the United States Navy was supposed to be salvaging equipment that morning. Instead, he watched Marines being cut to pieces 500 yards offshore, stranded on a coral reef the landing craft couldn't clear. So he disobeyed his orders. He took command of several wooden landing boats and steered them straight into a wall of lead. He reached into the bloody Pacific surf and pulled screaming men, one after another, out of the water that was killing them. He went back, and he went back again, and he went back again. He personally pulled 47 wounded Marines out of that reef. He supervised the rescue of about 30 more. He lost part of his hearing to the noise of the battle. He was awarded the Bronze Star with a V for valor. Now, he was the spy the government had hired before the war to photograph Nazi activity in Mexico under cover of a circus. He was the sailor the Marines needed when the tide miscalculated and the bullets started flying. He was the hero Hollywood forgot to talk about. He didn't just play a hero in a romantic comedy 10 years later. He was the reason 47 families on the American mainland still had a future. He married Mexican actress Margot in 1945. They were together for 40 years until she died of brain cancer in 1985. He was blacklisted in 1950 by association. Margot had attended an anti-Franco rally and was branded a communist, spat on in the streets, and forced to walk with a bodyguard. The only reason Eddie's career survived was that Hollywood couldn't quite bring itself to blacklist a Bronze Star recipient from Tarawa. He died on May 26, 2005. The official cause was pneumonia. The real cause was a long, slow surrender to Alzheimer's disease that had stolen the last decade of his memory. The war, the wife, the pig, the laughter, all of it. He was 99 years old. His son Edward, who had put his own acting career on hold for 8 years to care for his father full-time, was holding his hand at the end. Years before, in a quiet garden, Edward had once told him, "You're my hero." His fading father had whispered back, "You're your hero's hero." 16 months after Eddie died, Edward himself was gone. Lung cancer, age 55. A whole branch of a family tree fell in a year and a half. At the time of his death, Eddie Albert's estimated net worth was approximately $5 million. Modest by Hollywood standards, almost nothing compared to Audrey or Peck. But he wasn't counting dollars, he was counting names. 47 of them, every Marine he had pulled out of that water, every family back home who had received their son alive instead of in a flag-draped box. That was the only fortune he ever cared about. Irving Radovich provided the laughs. Eddie Albert provided the courage that saved 47 lives. If you made it this far without your throat tightening, you're not paying attention. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who still remembers Green Acres, someone who still loves Audrey Hepburn, someone who still believes that good people existed in Hollywood. Because those people need to know what these three actually paid to make Roman Holiday the perfect afternoon you remember.
Here? Oh, yeah, Joe fixed it.
The Forgotten Ones. Roman Holiday wasn't carried by three people alone. There was a whole gallery of supporting players, mostly European, mostly forgotten by the English-speaking world. Here's what happened to them. Hartley Power as Mr. Hennessy, born March 14, 1894 in New York City. He was the gruff news editor who barked at Joe Bradley and dangled $5,000 over the princess scoop. Born American. Made his career British. Died British. He retired from acting in 1957 and quietly faded into the English countryside. He died in a Brighton nursing home on January 29, 1966, at the age of 71. The man who shouted at Gregory Peck on screen left the world without a sound.
Let's see, you're into me for about 500 now.
Tullio Carminati as General Provno. Born September 21, 1894 in Zadar, on what was then the Dalmatian coast of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. His full name was Count Tullio Carminati di Brambilla, an actual Italian count. By age 19, he was Italy's youngest leading man. He became the personal leading man of the legendary Eleonora Duse herself, And here's the part nobody tells you. In December of 1941, in the middle of his Hollywood career, the United States government threw Tullio Carminati in prison for anti-American activities. He was held for 5 months and repatriated to Italy in May of 1942. He came back to film Roman Holiday 11 years later. He died of a stroke in Rome on February 26, 1971, at the age of 76, a nobleman who survived a war, a prison camp, and his own century. Margaret Rawlings as Countess Vereberg. Born June 5, 1906, in Osaka, Japan, the daughter of a missionary, she became one of Britain's great tragedians. Her dance of the Seven Veils as Salome at the Gate Theatre in London was so intense, audience members reportedly fainted. The Countess scolding Princess Anne for wanting to sleep in pajamas was, in real life, a woman who had once made grown adults pass out from the power of her stage presence. She died on May 19, 1996, in Wendover, England, at the age of 89.
Please put on your slippers and come away from the window.
Paolo Carlini as Mario Delani, the hairdresser. Born January 6, 1922, in the small town of Sant'Arcangelo di Romagna in Italy. When he was the flirtatious barber who cut Princess Anne's hair into that famous gamine crop and asked her to dinner. He appeared in 45 films. He never married publicly. He never spoke much about his private life. He died in Rome on November 3, 1979, at the age of 57. The youngest of the entire Roman Holiday, cast to leave the world. The man who flirted with Audrey Hepburn outlived her in years on screen, but lost the race in years on Earth.
Why you not come dancing tonight with me? You should see.
All of them are gone now. Audrey, 63, of cancer, in a Swiss garden. Gregory, 87, of bronchopneumonia, holding his wife's hand. Eddie, 99, of pneumonia, with his son beside him. Hartley Power in a Brighton nursing home. Tullio Carminati of a stroke in Rome. Margaret Rawlings in the English countryside. Paolo Carlini at 57. Much the youngest of them all. Princess Anne never had to grind tulip bulbs into flour to survive. Joe Bradley never had to bury a son. Irving Radovich never had to wade into machine gun fire to pull strangers out of the surf. That was fiction. This was real. And the people who gave you one perfect afternoon in Rome paid a price the opening credits never showed. Princess Anne sacrificed her one perfect day for a lifetime of duty. Audrey Hepburn sacrificed her one perfect career for a lifetime of feeding the hungry. Joe Bradley sacrificed his scoop for love. Gregory Peck sacrificed his safety for his conscience. Irving Radovich made you laugh in a Roman cafe. Eddie Albert pulled 47 men out of the bloody Pacific so the rest of us could live in a world where laughter was still possible. Drop a comment. Which story hit you the hardest? And here's the real question. Did you know that the funny photographer cracking jokes beside Gregory Peck had pulled 47 Marines out of the surf at Tarawa under machine gun fire 10 years before he ever picked up that fake camera? Because once you know that, you will never watch Irving Radovich the same way again. Rome. By all means, Rome. We watch Roman Holiday for the fairy tale. We remember it because of the humans. 7 survivors of a century that tried to break each one of them. Hunger, war, blacklists, prison cells, lost children, lost minds, and they still chose to give us one perfect day in the sun. Next time you see them ride that Vespa down a sunlit Roman street, don't just see the actors. Don't just see the costumes or the cobblestones or the famous black and white grin. See the survivors, every single one of them.